do something like that.
To a topic we've been talking a lot about, both here and on a radio show, the scathing remarks towards British Prime Minister Gordon Brown from Daniel Hannan. He's a member of the European Parliament and joins us in a moment. But first, his greatest hit. Let's play it again.
The truth, Prime Minister, is that you have run out of our money. The country as a whole is now in negative equity. It's not that you're not apologising. Like everyone else, I've long accepted that you're pathologically incapable of accepting responsibility for these things. It's that you're carrying on, willfully worsening our situation, wantonly spending what little we have left. Prime Minister, you cannot carry on forever squeezing the productive bit of the economy in order to fund an unprecedented engorgement of the unproductive bit. They can see what the markets have already seen, that you are the devalued Prime Minister of a devalued government.
All right, Daniel, thank you so much for being with us. Great to talk to you. Are you surprised?
Good morning, Joe.
Are you surprised by the response your comments have sparked?
Completely overwhelmed, yeah. I mean, I've been making similar speeches, posting them on the web, for a year without, I'm lucky normally if I get 800 hits. Maybe this struck a chord because people on both sides of the Atlantic are worried about this spending juggernaut, and I guess a lot of people outside the Beltway, outside what we call the Westminster Village, feel that nobody ever asked them before taking all this money, in these repeated bailouts and stimulus and pork barrel packages.
Daniel, you know that things have gotten bad when the French start lecturing United States leaders on spending too much, and this past weekend, German Chancellor Angela Merkel had this to say about Barack Obama pushing her to spend more money. I will not let anyone tell me that we must spend more money. Have we reached a tipping point where some leaders may start to back off of these massive spending sprees?
I've been a member of the European Parliament for 10 years. I'm generally critical of the European project, and I never thought I would say what I'm about to say now, but I am looking to the French and German governments to rescue us. They're right. We've run out of money. You guys are running out of money. We have already exhausted the Treasury and exhausted our credit. There was an extraordinary moment a few days ago when the Governor of the Bank of England, who's normally a rather reclusive figure who kind of gets dragged out blinking like a mole into the sunlight from time to time, went public and said, we just can't do this, Prime Minister. You've already spent everything that was there. Yeah. And, when we've got to the French and Germans telling us that you have to live within your means, I think that is a pretty humiliating situation for the Anglo-Saxon world generally.
No doubt about it. What's most disturbing to me is the fact that America has been wringing their hands, asking, beating their chests, wondering how we were duped into following the financial schemes of Wall Street over the past 10 years, saying these numbers don't add up. And yet, here we have, in plain sight, the Democratic Congress having their budget office saying Barack Obama's numbers don't add up. They'll lead to financial ruin, and all they employ is an accounting trick to just make the problem go away for a day. Why do people blindly follow governments that seem intent on bankrupting them?
And to some extent, it's because in a crisis, people want to give the benefit of the doubt to the guy who looks as though he's got the answers. And so frenzied activity is often can create the illusion that you know what you're doing. And certainly that happened in Britain. And that was the background of the first bailout, the first stimulus package. Unfortunately, it then takes on a momentum of its own, because the bailouts and the stimulus packages don't work. And the government's response then is not to say we were wrong, because they can't then turn around and tell the taxpayers that it was all a waste. So they have to carry on. They make it worse every time. There's this kind of dreadful, grisly logic of the thing where bailouts beget further bailouts, and where the ministers are saying, OK, we spent a whole bunch of money, and that didn't work, so what's the answer? Oh, let's spend another bunch of money, even more. Yeah. Maybe that will work. And by the time we find out that it really didn't work, it's too late. The debt is being paid by our children and our grandchildren down the generations.
Well, looking at the front page of Newsweek magazine, it seems like people are beginning to start ask the questions, Richard Haass. And I guess my question to you is America the Bernie Madoff of all economies when you really think about it, as Krugman said?
we are on an unsustainable trajectory right now, and it's the reason that it's important that any spending that is done be truly stimulus spending, and this can't simply become a holiday, if you will, for people to push all their pet projects. We can't afford to do everything right now. Or down the road, we will surely face an enormous dollar problem. We're already seeing signs of that, where the world will no longer accept the dollar as the international currency, and that would put us into a true financial crisis.
Daniel, we have Richard Haass with the Council on Foreign Relations, President of the Council on Foreign Relations here. Do you have a question for Daniel?
Well, the one question is whether there's any chance of doing something on trade. It's the one thing we haven't heard. If one wants to have real stimulus that is not inflationary, I would think having a world trade agreement would be the single best way to go. Why aren't we hearing anything about that out of Europe in the run-up to the summit?
I think that's a really, really good question. The one useful thing we could do is avoid protectionism. It may not be within the gift of the G20 countries to ensure a solution to the current world trade talks, but there's a lot of things they could do. At the very least, they could have an agreement among the participants that they won't raise tariffs within the small margin permitted under the existing rules. But what I'd really like to see them do is move against non-tariff barriers to trade. And by non-tariff barriers, I mean things like nationalizing banks, subsidizing car industries, and having Buy America type clauses. In other words, restrictions on government tenders that are intended to redirect things towards the home market. And I'm talking to you, Mr. President. Or the one thing we can all do in this situation is to try and avoid the mistakes that were made in the 1930s when the crash was followed by turning into protectionism, which then condemned the world to years of recession and ultimately to fascism and war.
Daniel, as we move forward, do you suspect that there will be a conservative counterbalance in Great Britain? Do you think the Conservatives will most likely beat back Gordon Brown in the next election?
I'm pretty sure that we're going to win the next election because people are very angry about what's happened. But in terms of the kind of wider intellectual rebirth of conservatism, I'm not naturally sanguine by temperament, and I'm not particularly optimistic about this. Last time that this happened, there had been a real consensus behind free trade. You go back to the Hoover and Coolidge and Harding administrations, free trade and laissez-faire seemed as embedded then as it was in the 90s now. And how quickly things turned when there was a crash. And it basically condemned us to 40 years of corporatism and Keynesianism and state intervention. And it was only when people had seen where that ends, with total exhaustion, with stagnation, with inflation, and with massive debt, it was only then that people were really ready for the remedies. And I just hope that the generation that we live in doesn't have to go through that entire process, that we can kind of short-circuit it and realise early on, before we get to a complete calamity, that you can't carry on forever spending money.
Well, Daniel, if more people like you will get out and speak and tell the truth, and certainly perhaps we won't have to wait a generation. But right now, conservatives are, what did he say of the head of the Bank of England? Blinking? Conservatives are coming out blinking like a mole? Something like that.
There was a really nice newspaper article here where a journalist said he was like Bilbo Baggins. He's a little tubby guy, comes blinking out of his hobbit hole. But you know what? Bilbo Baggins turned out to be right in the end, and I think on this one the governor of the Bank of England is right.
I think he is too. All right, thank you so much, Daniel. Daniel Hannan from the European Parliament. Great speaking with you.